The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, and Adelaide Walsh pressed her gloved hand against the worn leather seat to steady herself, knowing that the moment she stepped down into the dust of Winnetka, California, she would become someone else entirely. It was October 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town nestled in the San Fernando Valley. Adelaide had traveled for 3 weeks from St. Louis, carrying nothing but a single trunk and a collection of lies she had rehearsed until they felt almost like truth. The advertisement in the Matrimonial Times had been simple enough. Rancher seeks respectable woman for marriage. Must be of good character and willing to work hard. No drunkards or women of ill repute. She had answered with a letter full of half-truths, describing herself as a widow whose husband had died in a mining accident, a woman seeking a fresh start in California. She had not mentioned the gambling debts, the men who were looking for her, or the fact that her real name was not Adelaide Walsh at all. The stagecoach driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, helped her down. "This here is Winnetka, miss. Not much to look at, but folks are decent enough." Adelaide smoothed her traveling dress and looked around. The town consisted of a single main street with buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support. A saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, a small church with a crooked steeple. Dust devils danced in the street, and somewhere a dog barked lazily in the heat. It was nothing like the bustling streets of St. Louis, nothing like the life she had fled. "Thank you," she said softly, and the driver tipped his hat before climbing back up to his perch. She stood there with her trunk at her feet, wondering if Vincent Lawson would even recognize her from the single photograph she had sent. It had been taken 2 years ago, before everything had fallen apart, before she had learned what desperation truly meant. "Miss Walsh?" The voice came from behind her, deep and steady. Adelaide turned and found herself looking up at a man who stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. He wore dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, but she could see enough to know that he was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30 at most, with a strong jaw and eyes the color of creek water after rain. "Mr. Lawson?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He nodded and removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Vincent Lawson, pleased to finally meet you, Miss Walsh. I hope the journey was not too difficult." There was something in his voice that made Adelaide want to tell him the truth right then and there, to confess everything and face whatever consequences came. But she thought of the men in St. Louis, thought of what would happen if they found her, and she smiled instead. "It was long, but I am grateful to be here," she said. Vincent picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "I have a wagon just down the street. My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town. It is not fancy, but it is solid, and the land is good. I hope it will suit you." They walked together down the dusty street, and Adelaide was aware of curious eyes watching from windows and doorways. She knew what they were thinking. Mail-order brides were common enough in California, where men outnumbered women 3 to 1, but that did not make her feel any less like a curiosity on display. The wagon was simple but well-maintained, and Vincent helped her up onto the seat before loading her trunk in the back. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue at the 2 horses. As they left Winnetka behind, Adelaide studied him from the corner of her eye. He had a profile like something carved from stone, all hard angles and quiet strength. His hands on the reins were large and capable, marked with calluses and old scars. He did not speak much, and Adelaide found herself filling the silence with nervous chatter. "Your letters mentioned you raise cattle," she said. "Some cattle, mostly horses. The land here is better suited for horses." He glanced at her briefly. "Do you ride?" Adelaide thought of the few times she had been on horseback, usually in the company of men who had too much money and too little sense. "A little. I'm willing to learn more." Vincent nodded. "That is good. A ranch wife needs to be comfortable in the saddle." The words ranch wife hung in the air between them. They had corresponded for 3 months, but this was the first time they had met in person. The plan was for them to marry within the week, after Adelaide had time to settle in and they had both decided they could tolerate each other. It was a practical arrangement, nothing more. Adelaide told herself that was exactly what she needed. The ranch appeared as they crested a low hill. It was more substantial than Adelaide had expected. A 2-story house with a wide porch, a large barn, several corrals filled with horses, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. The house itself was painted white with green shutters that had faded in the California sun. Someone had planted roses along the porch, though they looked thirsty and neglected. "My mother planted those roses before she passed," Vincent said, following her gaze. "I have not been good about keeping them up." "They are beautiful," Adelaide said, and she meant it. There was something hopeful about those struggling roses, something that made her chest ache. Vincent helped her down from the wagon, and Adelaide noticed the way he held her waist a moment longer than necessary, as if testing the reality of her presence. Then he stepped back and cleared his throat. "I will show you to your room. I had my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, prepare it for you. She comes twice a week to help with the heavy cleaning and cooking. The rest of the time it would be just us and the ranch hands, though they take most of their meals in the bunkhouse." Adelaide followed him into the house, which was cooler and darker after the bright afternoon sun. The main room was simply furnished but clean, with a stone fireplace and furniture that looked handmade. There were books on a shelf near the window, and Adelaide found herself surprised. Many ranchers she had known could barely write their own names. Vincent led her upstairs to a bedroom that faced east, with windows that would catch the morning light. The bed was covered with a quilt in shades of blue and cream, and there was a washstand with a porcelain pitcher and bowl. It was plain but comfortable, and Adelaide felt something in her chest loosen slightly. "This was my mother's room," Vincent said. "I thought you might like it. My room is down the hall. After we marry, we can discuss other arrangements." Adelaide set her handbag on the bed and turned to face him. "Mr. Lawson, I want you to know that I will do my best to be a good wife to you. I know this is an unusual situation, but I promise to work hard and to honor our agreement." Vincent studied her for a long moment, and Adelaide forced herself to meet his gaze. Up close, she could see that his eyes were not just gray, but flecked with green and gold, and there was an intelligence in them that made her nervous. "I believe you," he said finally, "and please call me Vincent. We are to be married after all." He left her to unpack, and Adelaide sank onto the bed, her hands shaking. She had done it. She was here, far enough from St. Louis that the men who were looking for her would never think to search. She was safe, or as safe as she could be with so many lies between her and the truth. She unpacked her few belongings, 3 dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, a hairbrush, and at the very bottom of the trunk, wrapped in an old shawl, a small leather bag containing $200 in gold coins. It was all that remained of the money she had taken, and she knew she should feel guilty about it, but all she felt was relief that she had something to fall back on if everything fell apart. That evening, Mrs. Chen came to prepare dinner. She was a small woman with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Adelaide up and down with an expression that might have been approval or suspicion. Adelaide could not tell which. "You are the mail order bride," Mrs. Chen said in heavily accented but clear English. "Mr. Vincent is a good man. You be good to him." "I will," Adelaide promised, though she wondered if keeping secrets counted as being good to someone. Dinner was beef stew with fresh bread, and Adelaide ate at the table with Vincent while Mrs. Chen bustled around the kitchen. The silence between them was not uncomfortable exactly, but it was heavy with all the things they did not know about each other. "Tell me about yourself," Vincent said finally, setting down his spoon. "Your letters told me facts, but I would like to know more. What made you decide to come to California?" Adelaide had prepared for this question, had rehearsed her answer 100 times. "After my husband died, there was nothing left for me in St. Louis. His debts took everything we had, and I had no family to turn to. I wanted a fresh start, a chance to build a new life." It was not entirely a lie. There had been debts, though they had not belonged to a husband, and she did want a fresh start desperately. Vincent nodded slowly. "I am sorry for your loss. It must have been difficult to leave everything behind." Sometimes leaving is easier than staying, Adelaide said, and that at least was the absolute truth. What was your husband's name? Vincent asked, and Adelaide's heart stopped for just a moment. Thomas, she said, picking the first name that came to mind. Thomas Walsh. He was a good man, just unlucky. Vincent looked at her with those steady gray-green eyes, and Adelaide had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her. But he just nodded and returned to his meal. After dinner, Vincent showed her around the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air had finally begun to cool. Adelaide could see the San Gabriel Mountains in the distance, their peaks still holding snow even in October. The horses are my main income, Vincent explained as they walked toward the corrals. I breed and train them, then sell them to the army and to other ranches. It is steady work, and the demand is always there. They stopped at a fence, and several horses came over to investigate. Vincent pulled an apple from his pocket and fed it to a gray mare who nuzzled his hand affectionately. This is Artemis, he said. She is my best breeding mare, smart as a whip and fast as lightning. Adelaide reached out tentatively and stroked the mare's nose. The horse whuffed softly and pushed her head into Adelaide's hand, seeking more attention. She likes you, Vincent said, and there was surprise in his voice. She is usually wary of strangers. I have always liked animals, Adelaide said. They are honest in a way that people often are not. Vincent looked at her curiously. That is an interesting observation. Adelaide realized she had said too much, revealed too much of herself. She pulled her hand back and changed the subject. How many horses do you have? 23 right now, plus the 2 that pull the wagon and the 4 riding horses we use for working the ranch. My foreman, Manuel, and 2 other hands help me manage everything. You will meet them tomorrow. They walked back to the house as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Vincent pointed out constellations, telling her their names in a voice that held the quiet wonder of someone who had spent many nights under the open sky. Adelaide found herself relaxing despite her nervousness, lulled by the peace of the ranch and the genuine kindness in Vincent's manner. I should let you rest, Vincent said when they reached the porch. Tomorrow will be a long day. I thought I could take you into town to meet the preacher and arrange the wedding if that suits you. Adelaide nodded. That would be fine. Good night then, Adelaide. It was the first time he had used her first name, and the sound of it on his lips made something flutter in her stomach. Good night, Vincent. She went upstairs to her room and changed into her nightgown, then stood at the window looking out at the darkened landscape. Somewhere out there, beyond the mountains and the desert, were the people she had run from. But here, in this quiet place with this quiet man, she had a chance at something different. All she had to do was keep her secrets buried. The wedding took place 5 days later in the small church with the crooked steeple. Adelaide wore her best dress, a deep blue silk that she had bought in better times, and Vincent wore a clean suit that smelled faintly of cedar from the trunk where it had been stored. The preacher was an elderly man named Reverend Michaels, who seemed more interested in getting through the ceremony quickly than in asking difficult questions. There were a handful of witnesses, Mrs. Chen, who had insisted on coming, Manuel, Vincent's foreman, a Mexican man with a weathered face and kind smile, and a few townspeople who had come out of curiosity. Adelaide spoke her vows in a steady voice, promising to love, honor, and cherish a man she barely knew, a man she was lying to with every breath. When the preacher told Vincent he could kiss his bride, Vincent leaned down and pressed his lips to hers gently, briefly. It was Adelaide's first kiss in 2 years, and she was surprised by the warmth of it, by the flutter of something that might have been hope in her chest. They had a small reception at the ranch with Mrs. Chen providing food and Manuel playing guitar while a few of the neighbors danced in the yard. Adelaide found herself swept into conversation with the neighboring ranch wives, women who seemed eager to welcome her into their community. They asked polite questions about St. Louis and her journey west, and Adelaide answered with her practiced lies, hating herself a little more with each word. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Adelaide felt her nervousness return. She was married now, truly married, and that meant sharing a bed with a stranger. She had thought she was prepared for it, had told herself it was just another performance, but as Vincent walked her upstairs, her hands were shaking. Vincent seemed to sense her anxiety. When they reached the bedroom, his bedroom, which was larger than the one she had been staying in, he turned to her and spoke gently. "Adelaide, I know this is all very sudden. We barely know each other. I do not expect anything tonight beyond your company. We can take our time with everything else." Adelaide looked up at him, searching his face for deception or hidden demands, but she saw only patience and understanding. "You are very kind," she said softly. "I am practical," Vincent corrected. "A marriage built on fear and obligation is no marriage at all. I want us to have a chance at something real." Adelaide changed into her nightgown in the adjoining dressing room, and when she came out, Vincent was already in bed, the covers pulled up to his waist. He had left the lamp burning low, and in the soft light he looked younger, less intimidating. Adelaide climbed into the other side of the bed, careful to keep space between them. The mattress was comfortable, and the sheets smelled clean, like soap and sunshine. "Good night, Adelaide," Vincent said, and he reached over to turn down the lamp. "Good night, Vincent." In the darkness, Adelaide lay awake, listening to Vincent's breathing, gradually slow into sleep. She had expected demands, expected to have to submit to the physical side of marriage whether she wanted to or not. Instead, she had been given patience and space, and it made the weight of her lies feel even heavier. The weeks that followed settled into a routine. Adelaide woke early to help Mrs. Chen with breakfast, though the older woman seemed to resent the interference in her kitchen. She learned to make the strong coffee that Vincent preferred and to fry eggs without breaking the yolks. After breakfast, Vincent would go out to work with the horses, and Adelaide would tackle the household chores, washing, mending, cleaning, tending to those neglected roses. In the afternoons, Vincent began teaching her to ride. He started her on a gentle mare named Daisy, showing her how to sit properly in the saddle, how to hold the reins, how to communicate with the horse through subtle shifts of weight and pressure. Adelaide discovered she had a natural aptitude for it, and before long, she was riding out with Vincent to check on the horses in the far pastures. Those rides became Adelaide's favorite part of the day. There was something about being on horseback, moving across the open land with the wind in her face, that made her feel free in a way she had not felt in years. And Vincent was a patient teacher, never critical, always encouraging. He told her stories about the ranch, about growing up in California when it was still wild and largely unsettled, about his parents who had come west in search of opportunity and built something lasting out of dust and determination. "My father died when I was 19, Vincent said one afternoon as they rested the horses by a creek that ran through his property. "Heart gave out while he was mending a fence. My mother only lasted another year after that. I think she died of a broken heart as much as anything else." "That must have been very hard," Adelaide said, and she meant it. Despite her own complicated relationship with truth, she could recognize genuine grief when she saw it. "It was. But it taught me something important. Life is short and often unfair. The people we love can be taken from us without warning. That is why I want to build something solid here, something that will last. A family, children, a legacy." He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "That is why I sent for a wife." Adelaide looked away, unable to hold his gaze. "I hope I can give you those things." "I think you can," Vincent said simply. At night they continued to share a bed, though Vincent kept his promise not to push for physical intimacy. But gradually the space between them began to shrink. Adelaide would wake to find herself curled against his side, drawn there by the warmth of his body and the comfort of his presence. Sometimes his arm would be around her, holding her gently even in sleep. It felt natural in a way that surprised her, this casual intimacy that was growing between them. One morning, nearly 6 weeks after her arrival, Adelaide woke to find Vincent already awake, propped up on one elbow watching her. The early light was filtering through the curtains, turning everything soft and golden. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning, Adelaide replied, suddenly very aware of how close they were, of the warmth of his body beside hers. Vincent reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. You are very beautiful, he said. I feel like I should tell you that more often. Adelaide felt heat rise to her face. You do not have to say such things. I know, but I want to. His hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Adelaide, I know we married for practical reasons, but I find myself caring for you more each day. I would like our marriage to be a real one in every way, if you are willing. Adelaide's heart was pounding. She knew what he was asking, and part of her wanted to say yes, wanted to let herself fall into this gentle man's arms and forget about everything she was running from. But another part of her, the part that knew what would happen if her past caught up with her, hesitated. Vincent must have seen the conflict in her eyes because he leaned back slightly, giving her space. I am not trying to pressure you. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I care for you too, Adelaide said, and it was the most honest thing she had said since arriving in Winnetka. I am just afraid. Of what? Of not being what you need, of disappointing you. Vincent smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and almost boyish. Adelaide, you work harder than anyone I have ever met. You have learned to ride, you have taken care of the house, you have even brought my mother's roses back to life. You could never disappoint me. He leaned down and kissed her, slowly this time, thoroughly, and Adelaide felt herself melting into it. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. May I? Vincent asked, his hand resting on the tie of her nightgown. Adelaide nodded, unable to speak, and Vincent kissed her again as he slowly, carefully began to unlace the ribbons. He took his time, treating her like something precious and fragile, and Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness of it. Afterwards, as they lay tangled together in the rumpled sheets, Vincent held her close and pressed kisses to her hair, her forehead, her cheeks. My wife, he murmured, my beautiful wife. Adelaide buried her face against his chest, overwhelmed by a rush of emotion that felt dangerously close to happiness. For the first time since leaving St. Louis, she let herself imagine a future here, a real life with this good man who treated her with such care. But that fragile happiness was shattered 2 weeks later when Adelaide went into town to pick up supplies at the general store. She was examining fabric for a new dress when she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. Well, I will be damned if it is not little Addie Turner. Adelaide froze, the bolt of cloth falling from her numb fingers. She turned slowly to see a man standing in the doorway of the general store, backlit by the afternoon sun. He was tall and thin, dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place in the dusty frontier town, with slicked back hair and a smile that had never reached his eyes. Marcus Fairchild, one of the men she had been running from. I am sorry, you must have me confused with someone else, Adelaide said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. My name is Adelaide Lawson. Marcus laughed, a cold sound that made the shopkeeper look up in concern. Oh, that is rich, Adelaide Lawson. Is that what you are calling yourself these days, Addie? And who is the unfortunate bastard you tricked into marrying you? Adelaide's mind was racing. How had Marcus found her? She had been so careful, had covered her tracks so thoroughly. Unless someone had recognized her from her photograph. Unless someone had talked. I think you need to leave, the shopkeeper said, moving toward the door with a determined expression. This is a respectable establishment, and you are disturbing my customer. Marcus ignored him, his eyes fixed on Adelaide. Did you really think you could steal $20,000 from me and I would just let it go? Did you think you could run away and I would not find you? 20,000? Adelaide's voice came out as a whisper. But I only took 2,000, the rest was already gone. Funny how that works. Prices go up when people inconvenience me. Marcus took a step forward and Adelaide instinctively stepped back. Now you are going to come with me, and we are going to have a long conversation about how you are going to pay me back. She is not going anywhere with you. Vincent's voice came from behind Marcus, low and dangerous. Adelaide had never heard him sound like that before, and when Marcus turned, she saw Vincent standing in the doorway, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. Manuel stood beside him, similarly armed, and both men looked like they were carved from stone. "And who might you be?" Marcus asked, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Vincent Lawson, Adelaide's husband, and I suggest you leave my wife alone and get out of my town." Marcus laughed again, but there was a nervous edge to it now. "Your wife? She did not tell you, did she? Your precious Adelaide is not who you think she is. Her real name is Addie Turner, and she is a thief and a con artist. She worked in my gambling hall in St. Louis, convincing drunk miners to part with their money, and when I caught her skimming from the till, she ran away like the coward she is." Adelaide felt the walls closing in around her. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. She forced herself to look at Vincent, to see the betrayal and anger in his eyes, but what she saw instead was something that looked almost like understanding. "Is this true?" Vincent asked quietly, his eyes on Adelaide rather than Marcus. Adelaide wanted to lie, wanted to deny everything, but she was so tired of running, so tired of hiding. "Some of it," she said. "My name was Addie Turner, and I did work in a gambling hall, but I never stole from him. The money that went missing was taken by his business partner, and I only took what I was owed in back wages when I left." "You lying bitch!" Marcus snarled, starting toward her. He made it 2 steps before Vincent's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling onto the floor of the general store. Vincent stood over him, his gun now drawn, and pointed at Marcus's chest. "You need to leave," Vincent said, his voice deadly calm. "You need to get on the next stagecoach heading east, and you need to forget you ever saw my wife. Because if I ever see you in Winnetka again, if I ever hear that you have come near Adelaide again, I will kill you. Do you understand me?" Marcus wiped blood from his mouth and struggled to his feet. "You will regret this. Both of you." "The only thing I regret," Vincent said, "is not hitting you harder." Manuel stepped forward, his own gun drawn. "I think Mr. Lawson made himself clear. Time for you to go." Marcus looked between the 3 of them, and Adelaide could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of risks and rewards. Finally, he straightened his coat and headed for the door. "This is not over," he said to Adelaide. "Yes," Vincent said flatly, "it is." They watched Marcus walk down the street toward the stage station, and Adelaide felt her knees start to buckle. Vincent caught her, his arm strong around her waist, and guided her to a chair. "I am sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I am so sorry, Vincent. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Vincent knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Why did you not?" "Because I was afraid. I was afraid you would not want me if you knew what I had done, who I had been. I wanted so badly to start over, to be someone different, someone worthy of a man like you." "Adelaide," Vincent said gently, "or Addie, or whatever you want to be called, I do not care about your past. I care about the woman you are now, the woman who works hard, who is kind to everyone she meets, who brought my mother's roses back to life. That is who you are to me." "But I lied to you. I married you under false pretenses." Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Did you lie about wanting a fresh start? About wanting to build a life here?" "No, that was all true." "Did you lie about caring for me?" "No," Adelaide said, gripping his hands tightly. "I care for you so much, Vincent, more than I ever thought I could care for anyone." "Then the rest does not matter. We all have pasts, Adelaide. We all have things we are not proud of. What matters is what we do with the future we have been given." Adelaide threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder while he held her tightly. The shopkeeper discreetly turned away, and Manuel stepped outside to make sure Marcus was really leaving. When Adelaide finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, she saw Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway with a basket of vegetables, watching them with an expression that might have been approval. "Come," Vincent said, helping Adelaide to her feet. "Let us go home." That night, Adelaide told Vincent everything. They sat in front of the fireplace, Adelaide wrapped in a blanket, and she spoke for hours. She told him about growing up in an orphanage in St. Louis, about the desperation that had led her to take a job in Marcus Fairchild's gambling hall when she was barely 17. She told him about the things she had seen there, the men who had tried to take advantage of her, the way she had learned to protect herself with lies and misdirection. She told him about the money that had gone missing, about Marcus's business partner who had disappeared in the night, about how Marcus had decided to blame her for the loss. She told him about the $2,000 she had taken, money that was rightfully hers in back wages, and about how she had run, changing her name and her story until she had almost forgotten who she really was. Vincent listened without interrupting, his hand resting on her knee, his face serious but not judgmental. When she finally finished, exhausted and empty, he pulled her into his lap and held her. "Thank you for trusting me with the truth," he said. "I know that could not have been easy." "Do you hate me?" Adelaide asked in a small voice. "Hate you?" "Adelaide, I admire you. You survived things that would have broken most people. You made hard choices to protect yourself. There is no shame in that." "But I lied to you." "Yes, you did. And I will not pretend that does not sting a little, but I understand why you did it, and I forgive you. The question is, can you forgive yourself?" Adelaide had no answer to that. The next few days were tense. Adelaide kept expecting Marcus to return with the law or with hired men or with some new threat, but the stage station master confirmed that Marcus had left on the eastbound coach, and slowly Adelaide began to believe that maybe it really was over. Vincent hired 2 more ranch hands, men he trusted to keep watch over the property. He taught Adelaide to shoot, patiently correcting her stance and her aim until she could hit a tin can at 20 paces. He made sure she was never alone when she went into town, and he let it be known throughout Winnetka that anyone who bothered his wife would answer to him. Adelaide began to relax bit by bit. She threw herself into ranch work with renewed energy, determined to prove that she was worthy of Vincent's faith in her. She learned to help with the horses, to assist with the training, to keep the ranch books. She made friends with the neighboring ranch wives, women who welcomed her without judgment or suspicion. And at night, in the privacy of their bedroom, she and Vincent grew closer in every way. Vincent was a patient and attentive lover, always focused on her pleasure as much as his own. He learned what made her gasp, what made her sigh, what made her cry out his name, and Adelaide learned to trust him with her body in the same way she had learned to trust him with her secrets. 3 months after Marcus Fairchild's appearance in Winnetka, Adelaide woke up feeling nauseous. She barely made it to the chamber pot before losing the contents of her stomach. Vincent held her hair back and rubbed her back, concern etched on his face. "We should send for the doctor," he said. "I do not need a doctor," Adelaide said weakly. "I think I know what this is." Vincent's eyes widened. "Are you saying—" "I think I might be pregnant." Vincent let out a whoop of joy that probably woke everyone on the ranch and pulled Adelaide into his arms, spinning her around despite her protests that he was making her dizzy. When he finally set her down, he was grinning from ear to ear. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby." Adelaide felt tears spring to her eyes, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they were tears of happiness. "Yes, we are going to have a baby." The pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor 2 weeks later. Adelaide was nearly 3 months along, which meant the baby would arrive in early summer. Vincent became impossibly protective, insisting she rest more, refusing to let her do any heavy work. Mrs. Chen clucked over her like a mother hen, forcing herbal teas and nutritious soups on her at every opportunity. Adelaide bloomed as her belly grew. She had never felt so healthy, so vital, so alive. She took long walks around the ranch, talking to the baby growing inside her, telling it stories about its father and the life they were building together. She made tiny clothes with fabric from the general store, her stitches neat and careful. She prepared the spare bedroom as a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and hanging curtains printed with tiny horses. Vincent was a constant presence, always there to rub her swollen feet, or fetch her strange food cravings, or simply hold her when the fears got too strong. Because Adelaide did have fears. She was afraid that Marcus would come back. She was afraid that something would happen to the baby. She was afraid that she did not deserve this happiness and that it would be taken away from her. But Vincent was always there to chase away the darkness. "You are stronger than you know," he would tell her, "and you are not alone anymore. Whatever happens, we will face it together." The baby came on a sweltering afternoon in June 1879. Adelaide's water broke while she was hanging laundry, and Vincent sent Manuel racing into town for the doctor while he helped Adelaide into the house. Mrs. Chen arrived within the hour, rolling up her sleeves with the efficiency of someone who had delivered many babies. The labor was long and difficult. Adelaide had heard stories from other women about childbirth, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of it, for the pain that seemed to split her in two, for the overwhelming need to push even when she thought she had no strength left. Vincent stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. And then, just as the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of orange and gold, Adelaide heard it, the thin, reedy cry of her baby. The doctor held up a small, wriggling form, and Adelaide felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, "a healthy baby boy." Vincent was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as the doctor placed their son in Adelaide's arms. The baby was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. He looked up at Adelaide with unfocused eyes, and she fell instantly, irrevocably in love. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama, and this is your papa, and we are going to love you so much." "What should we name him?" Vincent asked, his voice thick with emotion. Adelaide looked down at her son, at this tiny person who represented a future she had never dared to dream of. "What about Oliver? Oliver Vincent Lawson." "Oliver," Vincent repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, Oliver. Welcome to the family." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of diapers and crying and the sweet smell of baby skin. Adelaide discovered reserves of strength and patience she had not known she possessed. She learned to function on a few hours of sleep, to interpret Oliver's different cries, to soothe him when nothing else would work. Vincent was a devoted father, always willing to walk the floor with Oliver at 3 a.m, to change diapers without complaint, to make funny faces that sent the baby into fits of gurgling laughter. Adelaide would sometimes wake in the middle of the night to find Vincent's side of the bed empty, and she would go downstairs to find him sitting in the rocking chair by the fireplace, Oliver sleeping on his chest, both of them peaceful in the flickering firelight. When Oliver was 6 months old, something happened that Adelaide had been both dreading and hoping for. A letter arrived from St. Louis addressed to Mrs. Adelaide Lawson. Adelaide's hands shook as she opened it, afraid of what she might find inside. The letter was from a lawyer named Jonathan Prescott. He wrote that Marcus Fairchild had been arrested for fraud and embezzlement, that his gambling hall had been shut down, and that several women had come forward with testimony about his illegal activities. The charges against Adelaide had been dropped entirely, and if she wished, she could return to St. Louis without fear of prosecution. Adelaide read the letter 3 times, unable to quite believe it. She was free, truly, completely free. The past that had haunted her for so long was finally, definitively over. She showed the letter to Vincent that evening, after Oliver was asleep in his cradle. Vincent read it carefully, then pulled Adelaide into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. Relieved. Grateful. A little strange, if I'm being honest. I spent so long being afraid, and now there is nothing to be afraid of anymore. Do you want to go back to St. Louis? Adelaide shook her head firmly. No. This is my home now. You and Oliver and this ranch, this is where I belong. I do not want to go back to who I was. I want to keep being who I am now. Vincent kissed her forehead. I am glad. I do not think I could bear to lose you. You will never lose me, Adelaide promised. I am yours, Vincent, for as long as you will have me. Then I will have you forever. Life continued to unfold in the ways both big and small. Oliver grew into a bright, curious toddler with his father's gray-green eyes and his mother's determination. He learned to walk holding onto the corral fence, and his first word was horse, much to Vincent's delight. Adelaide watched him grow with a mixture of pride and disbelief that this perfect little person had come from her, that she had been given the gift of motherhood despite everything she had done, everything she had been. When Oliver was 2 years old, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1882 they welcomed a daughter into the family. They named her Rose Evelyn, after Vincent's mother and the roses that still bloomed faithfully every year along the front porch. Rose was a calm baby, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes, so different from Oliver's endless energy. Adelaide would sit on the porch in the evenings, nursing Rose while Oliver played at her feet, and she would think about how far she had come from that terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach nearly 4 years earlier. The ranch prospered under their joint efforts. Adelaide proved to have a head for business, and she took over managing the finances and contracts while Vincent focused on breeding and training. They expanded their operations, buying additional land and increasing their breeding stock. They became known throughout Southern California for the quality of their horses, and buyers came from as far as San Francisco to purchase Vincent Lawson's animals. Adelaide also became involved in the community in ways she had never expected. She helped start a school in Winnetka, teaching children to read and write in a small building that the townspeople built together. She organized fundraising efforts for families in need and became known as someone who could be counted on in a crisis. The women who had welcomed her as a curiosity became her true friends, and Adelaide discovered that she had built a life far richer than anything she had imagined. Vincent's love for her never wavered. If anything, it deepened with time, growing from attraction and affection into something solid and enduring. He told her often that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him, and Adelaide finally began to believe it. The lies she had told at the beginning of their relationship faded into insignificance, replaced by years of truth and partnership and love. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Adelaide with a trip to San Francisco. Mrs. Chen stayed at the ranch to watch Oliver and Rose, and for a week, Adelaide and Vincent were just a couple in love, exploring the city, eating in fine restaurants, dancing in hotel ballrooms. On their last night in the city, as they stood on the deck of a ship in the harbor watching the lights reflect on the water, Vincent pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, a beautiful gold band set with a single perfect diamond. When I married you the first time, Vincent said, I gave you a plain gold band because it was all I could afford. But I want you to have this too. I want you to have something that reflects how precious you are to me. Adelaide looked at the ring through tears, then at the man who had given her everything she had never known she needed. Vincent, you did not have to do this. I know, but I wanted to. Adelaide, you came into my life when I had given up on finding real love. I thought I was sending for a practical arrangement, someone to help run the ranch and maybe give me children. But you gave me so much more than that. You gave me joy and laughter and a partnership I never knew was possible. You are my best friend, my lover, my partner in everything, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me. Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, and Adelaide kissed him with all the love and gratitude in her heart. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you so much. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Oliver grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Rose became a whirlwind of energy and mischief, keeping everyone on their toes with her antics. In 1885, Adelaide gave birth to twin boys Daniel and James, who proved to be double the trouble and double the delight. Adelaide sometimes thought about the woman she had been before coming to Winnetka, Addie Turner, frightened and alone, convinced that she was unworthy of love or happiness. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from a story rather than her own past. She had become Adelaide Lawson so completely that sometimes she forgot she had ever been anyone else. One evening, when she was 32 years old and Vincent was 36, they sat together on the porch swing watching their children play in the yard. Oliver, now 10, was teaching 6-year-old Rose to throw a lasso while the 3-year-old twins tumbled in the grass like puppies. The sun was setting behind the mountains, and the air was sweet with the scent of roses and hay and home. "Do you ever regret it?" Adelaide asked suddenly. "Sending for a mail-order bride, taking a chance on a stranger?" Vincent looked at her with surprise. "Not for a single moment. Why do you ask?" "I just think about what might have happened if you had looked deeper into my background, if you had discovered my lies before we married. You could have sent me away. You could have had a completely different life." Vincent took her hand, running his thumb over the diamond ring that she still wore every day. "Adelaide, you were never a stranger. From the moment I read your first letter, I felt like I knew you. Maybe not the details of your past, but the person you were trying to become. And that is who I fell in love with. The woman who was brave enough to run toward a new life instead of staying trapped in an old one. The woman who worked harder than anyone I had ever met to prove she was worthy, even though she always was." "I do not feel brave," Adelaide admitted. "I feel like I got incredibly lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You made a choice to change your life, and you worked every day to build something better. That is not luck, my love. That is courage." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the children play. Oliver had successfully taught Rose the basics of lasso throwing, and now she was chasing the twins around the yard, trying to rope them like calves. Their shrieks of laughter filled the evening air, and Adelaide felt her heart swell with contentment. "I am happy," she said. And she realized with surprise that it was completely true. She was happy in a way she had never been before coming to Winnetka, happy in a way she had not known was possible. "I am really, truly happy." "Good," Vincent said, kissing the top of her head, "because you deserve to be." As the years went by, Vincent and Adelaide's family continued to grow and flourish. They welcomed one more child, a daughter named Clara, in 1888, completing their family of 6 children. The ranch became a lively, chaotic place full of laughter and love, and Adelaide discovered that she thrived in the organized chaos of raising a large family. Oliver took to ranching naturally, working alongside his father from a young age. By the time he was 16, he was managing some of the training himself, showing the same quiet patience and skill that Vincent possessed. Rose surprised everyone by developing a talent for drawing and painting, filling the house with sketches of horses and landscapes and family portraits. The twins, Daniel and James, were inseparable troublemakers who kept everyone entertained with their schemes and adventures. And little Clara, with her sweet nature and quick wit, became the darling of the family. Adelaide and Vincent grew old together in the way that couples do when they are truly happy. Their lives so intertwined that it became impossible to imagine one without the other. They developed private jokes and shared glances that could communicate volumes without words. They supported each other through losses and celebrated each other's triumphs. They made love with the same passion they had always had, though tempered now with the comfortable familiarity of decades together. When Adelaide turned 45, she decided to do something she had been thinking about for years. She sat down and wrote her story, all of it, from her difficult childhood to her time in the gambling hall to her arrival in Winnetka and everything that had followed. She wrote about her mistakes and her fears, about the lies she had told and the truth she had finally found. She wrote about Vincent and the children and the life they had built together. When she finished, she gave the manuscript to Vincent to read. He sat by the fire for an entire evening, reading page after page while Adelaide watched nervously. When he finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "This is beautiful," he said. "Adelaide, this is your truth, and it is powerful. What do you want to do with it?" "I want to keep it safe," Adelaide said. "Maybe someday, when the children are older, I will share it with them. I want them to know that their mother was not always the person they know now. I want them to understand that people can change, that mistakes do not have to define you, that it is never too late to choose a different path." Vincent stood and pulled her into his arms. "They are lucky to have you as their mother. We are all lucky to have you." Adelaide held him tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid strength of his body against hers. "I am the lucky one," she said. "You saved me, Vincent." "No," Vincent said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to land." On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, the entire community of Winnetka came together to celebrate. The ranch was filled with friends and neighbors, with music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. Oliver, now a married man himself with a baby on the way, gave a toast to his parents that brought everyone to tears. Rose had painted a family portrait as a gift, capturing all of them together in front of the ranch house with the mountains in the background. The twins performed a humorous skit about their parents' courtship that was only slightly embarrassing. And Clara, now 15, sang a song she had written about love and family and home. As Adelaide stood with Vincent's arm around her waist, surrounded by their children and grandchild-to-be, by friends who had become family, by the life they had built together over a quarter-century, she felt a sense of peace so complete it was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered to Vincent, though she knew the words were inadequate for everything she felt. Vincent smiled down at her, his gray-green eyes still as clear and honest as they had been the day she met him. "For what?" "For never digging up my past, for letting me be who I needed to be, for giving me a future when I thought I had lost mine." Vincent cupped her face in his hands, those work-roughened, capable hands that had held her through so many nights, that had built a life and a legacy out of nothing but love and determination. "Adelaide, the past does not matter. It never did. All that matters is what we do with the time we are given, and I am grateful for every single day I have been given with you." He kissed her then, in front of everyone, a kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership and unshakable devotion. The crowd cheered, and their children groaned good-naturedly, and Adelaide felt herself smiling against Vincent's lips. That night, after everyone had gone home, and the children were asleep in their rooms, Adelaide and Vincent lay in bed together, talking softly about the past and the future. Adelaide thought about the stagecoach that had brought her to Winnetka all those years ago, about the terrified woman with a fake name and a bag full of lies. She thought about how close she had come to never knowing this life, never meeting Vincent, never becoming the person she was always meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, running his fingers through her hair, which was now streaked with silver but still long and thick. "I was thinking about the day we met," Adelaide said, "about how nervous I was, how certain I was that you would see through me and send me away." "I did see through you," Vincent said, and Adelaide looked at him in surprise. "Not the details, maybe, but I saw that you were running from something. I saw that you were scared. I just did not care. I saw something else, too. I saw kindness and determination and courage. I saw the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Why did you never say anything? Why did you never push me to tell you the truth?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling in her hair. "Because I trusted you to tell me when you were ready, and because I believed that whatever you were running from, you had good reasons. I wanted you to feel safe enough with me to be honest, not cornered into confession." Adelaide felt tears well up in her eyes. "I do not know what I did to deserve you, Vincent Lawson." "You showed up," Vincent said simply. You took a chance on a stranger and a new life. You stayed when things got hard. You loved me and our children with everything you had. That is all anyone could ask for. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, their bodies still fitting together as perfectly as they had on their wedding night, though both bore the marks of time and childbearing and hard work. Afterwards, Adelaide lay with her head on Vincent's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and she thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. She had come to Winnetka expecting a practical arrangement, a marriage of convenience that would keep her safe from her past. Instead, she had found love, real and deep and lasting. She had found a partner who saw all of her, the good and the bad, and chose to love her anyway. She had found a home and a family and a purpose. She had found herself. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that are part of every life. They lost Mrs. Chen when Adelaide was 50, mourning the woman who had become like a mother to Adelaide. They watched their children grow and marry and have children of their own, the ranch house filling with grandchildren who brought new life and laughter to the old place. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and holidays, building traditions that would carry on for generations. Vincent's hair turned silver, then white, and he moved a little slower in the mornings, but his love for Adelaide never diminished. Adelaide developed arthritis in her hands, making it harder to do the detailed work she once loved. But she found new ways to be useful, sharing her knowledge and experience with the younger generation. When they were both in their 60s, they decided to semi-retire, turning over the day-to-day management of the ranch to Oliver and his wife. Vincent and Adelaide built a small house on the edge of the property, near the creek where Vincent had first told Adelaide about his parents, where they could enjoy their grandchildren without being in the middle of the ranch's constant activity. It was there, in that small house with its view of the mountains and the sound of the creek bubbling over stones, that they spent their final years together. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, talking about their life and their children and their gratitude for every moment they had been given. "Do you remember the first time I told you I loved you?" Vincent asked one evening when they were both 70. Adelaide thought back, sifting through decades of memories. "I do not think you ever said those exact words, actually. You showed me every day, but I do not remember a specific moment when you said it out loud." Vincent looked surprised. "Really? I could have sworn I told you." "You told me you cared for me. You told me you wanted a real marriage. But I do not think you ever said the words until after Oliver was born." "Well, that is a terrible oversight on my part," Vincent said. "Let me correct it now. Adelaide Lawson, I love you. I have loved you from the moment I first saw you standing in front of that general store with dust on your dress and determination in your eyes. I have loved you every day since, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." Adelaide smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you too, Vincent. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Even though I made you work so hard on the ranch?" Especially though, because working beside you taught me what partnership really means." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Adelaide thought about all the sunsets they had watched together over the years, all the quiet moments of contentment that had made up a life well lived. Vincent died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Adelaide beside him as she had been for 45 years. She woke in the early morning to find him still and cold, and though she had known this day would come eventually, the pain of it nearly broke her. She sat with him for a long time, holding his hand and talking to him as if he could still hear her, thanking him for every moment they had shared, for every kindness he had shown her, for the life he had given her. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of California. Vincent had been respected and beloved in the community, known for his integrity and his generosity and his skill with horses. But Adelaide knew that his greatest legacy was not the successful ranch or the quality of his bloodlines, or even the 6 children they had raised together. His greatest legacy was the love he had shown to a frightened woman with a false name and a desperate need for a second chance. Adelaide lived for another 5 years after Vincent's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. She spent her final years telling stories about Vincent and their life together, making sure that future generations would know what kind of man he had been, what kind of love they had shared. On a warm spring morning in 1922, Adelaide passed away quietly in her sleep, the manuscript of her story clutched in her hands. She was 76 years old, and she had lived a life beyond anything Addie Turner could have dreamed of back in that gambling hall in St. Louis. At her funeral, Oliver stood before the gathered crowd and read from his mother's manuscript, sharing her story for the first time. He read about her difficult childhood and her desperate flight from St. Louis. He read about her arrival in Winnetka with a false name and a heart full of fear. He read about how Vincent had loved her anyway, how he had given her space to become who she needed to be, how he had never once tried to dig up the past she was so desperate to bury. "My mother wanted us to know this story," Oliver said, his voice breaking with emotion. "She wanted us to understand that people are more than their worst moments, more than their biggest mistakes. She wanted us to know that love, real love, does not demand perfection. It accepts and forgives and makes space for growth." My father showed my mother that kind of love every day of their 45 years together, and in doing so, he gave her the greatest gift anyone can give another person, the freedom to be herself. They buried Adelaide next to Vincent in the small cemetery on the edge of the ranch, under an oak tree that provided shade in the summer and shelter in the winter. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, they inscribed the words Vincent had said to her on their 25th anniversary: "The past does not matter. All that matters is what we do with the time we are given." The ranch continued for generations, passed down through Adelaide and Vincent's children and their children's children. The house where they had lived, where they had raised their family and built their life together, was preserved and cherished. The roses that Adelaide had brought back to life continued to bloom faithfully every year, tended by hands that remembered the woman who had loved them. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting behind the mountains and the air was sweet with the scent of roses and hay, people said you could still feel the presence of Adelaide and Vincent on that ranch. You could feel the love they had shared, the second chance they had given each other, the proof that sometimes the most beautiful futures are built on the ruins of painful pasts. Because Adelaide had come to Winnetka with a past she tried to bury, full of mistakes and fears and desperate choices, and Vincent, that good and gentle man, had never once tried to dig it up. Instead, he had planted something new over top of it: love and trust and faith in who she could become. And from that rich soil had grown a life more beautiful than either of them could have imagined, a legacy of love that would endure long after both of them were gone. The mail-order bride with the false name and the frightened heart had found her home at last, and the cowboy who had never dug up her past had given her the greatest gift of all: a future worth living, a love worth holding on to, and the freedom to finally, truly become herself.